Hi, today I want to talk about lists. And as I mentioned in the welcome note, lists are very, very important to Python. I know you guys coming from CS2 at least, or some other classes, and you have been using array list and things in that matter. And of course, Python being Python does things differently to make it either easier or simply different. So it is very, very important to Python. So I want to be sure that you guys spend enough time on list. We use list almost everywhere. Anything that happens, we look at list first, and that's something that we want to talk about. Uh, so how do we go through the list, the common algorithm, uh, and how is it happening in the function, and of course the tables. So some basic stuff is coming in from your previous class, so I'm not going to repeat it. Why do we need lists or arrays in that matter in C++ and Java, and how we're going to deal with this. So lists are so the way that we're going to create it, we're going to have a square bracket. We can put some initial values in it, or we just can have a empty list. Remember, empty list doesn't have nothing in it. So the pointer to the list is going to be pointing to none. So null in Python is a non-pointer, so that's what it is. How do we access it? We have different ways of accessing lists. We're going to look at the detail of that. One way of it is just the index, so we can go with the index through it. One thing that I want to be sure that we understand in Python, you do have a negative index. So I can have values if I can type values, value, values bracket -1. So I can have a -1, I can have negative number, and of course it's going to start from the right and it's going to go to the left. Sometimes in our previous classes, we wish we had the -1, but we're going to be careful that we still can go out of the boundary. So we're going to see how we're going to handle that. So accessing the list, we're going to just put a bracket with the number in it. That's we already know how is that happening. And again, when we're creating a list, we are creating an object that the address is going to be put in our variable called values. So the strings on the list are very, they have differences and they have similarities and they have things right after each other. So the biggest difference between these things is the list can have any type in it. That's another thing that you want to know about the list, that you can mix it up. It doesn't have to have, in C++, in Java, if your array is integer, you have to use everything as integer. Or if it's a string, it has to be all a string. But in Python, you can have the first element as integer, the second one as a string, and so on and so forth. Let's not go overboard with that. We're going to get there. Uh, One of the things about the Python is the strings are immutable, meaning that you cannot change things inside the string, but you can change things inside lists. So we can go out of range, and we're going to learn how to handle the exceptions. So if we are pointing to an index that doesn't exist, we will get out of range. Remember, in C++, in arrays, you would go outside of the array, and it's going to be using it. in Java and Python, you get out of range error. So if I have 8 elements in my list, I do not have index 8. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a function to tell us about the lengths for the list, and that is called len. So we can just call it and see the number of elements in there. So when we are accessing, we're going to be putting the index in there. We can create a list like this. So this one will create a list of 4 elements. You guys been practicing on the for loop. Some of you were not comfortable with it, but I'm hoping that you guys get used to it with the last few chapters. So we can use the range, but the best way is not to have a hard-coded number. The best way is to use the lengths for the range. So we can just say for I in range length. So we can do that, or we can use the each for each element. So this is called for each. That means if I put a variable over here, it's going to go through my list and it's going to pick up the first one, put it in this one. We can do whatever we want to do in this variable, and then it's going to go to the next one. It's going to go through the whole list. But you got to keep in mind that it is not doing it. You cannot modify the list like this. It's going to take the value and it's going to put it in this variable. It's creating a local variable for each element. So this is called for each. And of course, we have the for with the range one for Python. So again, a list reference is going to be pointing to a location in the memory. That means it's only going to contain address. It doesn't contain the actual things. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. Remember, every time we have an object, the address is the one that we're going to be dealing with, not the whole object. So if we do this, if we use equal sign for to copy one list to another, it is going to copy the address. Remember, the variable is holding the address of the list. So that means they both are pointing to the same location. That means now if I change anything on the scores, the value is going to be changed too. So that's something that generally that's not what we want. Most of the time, this is not what we want. So we don't do it that way. So again, we do have a reverse subscript. That means you have a negative number. So you can go with the -2, which is the second to the last. And generally, when I use negative number, I just use the last few. I don't go all the way through the list, but you can if you want to go